Alright, hey, it's Rob, and I thought I would tell the story of my first job in Los Angeles. I moved to LA right after college. This was in the year 1989. and anyway, I'd gone to the Berklee College of Music. I had trained to be a recording engineer, which is what I still do today. So that's pretty cool. I actually got to use the stuff I learned in college in my career going forward. Anyway, my first job, as in many people's first jobs, was at the bottom of the ladder. And I was hired to work in a recording studio called The Record Plant, which is a pretty famous studio in Los Angeles. They also had locations up north in San Francisco, Sausalito. It had moved locations over the years. The one that I worked at, I know the building is still there, and I think it still operates as a recording studio. I don't know that it's called The Record Plant anymore. But anyway, it was off of Santa Monica Boulevard. And I got hired because, I had had this great background learning my, trade in college. And they certainly wanted to take advantage of that by putting me out in the parking lot to park cars. And that's where I started. At the record plant, in the little shed outside, they had a little parking lot across the street. And really, I think most people parked their own cars. I don't know, it's kind of a weird deal. But sometimes people stopped, and I would literally move the car 5 feet into a parking space, hang on to their keys, and sit outside all day. I wasn't even inside the actual record plant. And funnily enough, I had spent a couple summers in college working as a valet, parking cars at a country club and restaurants, so I was very experienced in valet parking. Of course, what I wanted to be experienced in was working inside of a recording studio. Well, you got to start somewhere. Anyway, so I was out in the parking shed, and this is LA, so of course the weather was nice. It was August, and I sat out there in that little shed all day. That was, my first gig in LA, 1989, like I said, and I got to park cars for some pretty famous people. I parked Milli Vanilli's Suzuki Samurai. They gave me $1 tip. Maybe the only time I ever got a tip at that job. I parked Iggy Pop's Hyundai, had no windshield. I parked the Beastie Boys rented Ford Escort, and then later on that same day, they reported in the news that a rented Ford Escort had ended up being pushed over the top of Mulholland Drive into a swimming pool. I don't know that was the Beastie Boys car. It sure looked like it was. But anyway, so those were my great brushes with celebrity during that time. And had a few more. I used to park David Crosby's car from Crosby, Stills and Nash. And every once in a while, he'd give me $20 to take it to the car wash. And then I'd come back and he'd say, did I give you $20 to, pay for the car wash? And I was pretty poor, so I think a few times I said, no, you didn't. So I got double the money for that deal. And I was out there in that parking shed for quite a while. Matter of fact, it actually started to get cold. I was out there 3 or 4 months. I don't know. It was the winter. And so my next promotion was the midnight to 8 in the morning janitor job, but inside the recording studio, so I actually got to be in the building. And I was seriously the world's worst janitor. I didn't know what I was doing. The first night I mixed ammonia and bleach and almost died. And it was it still is a big building. There were a lot of different places, areas, offices and things to clean, along with the recording studio. And then I would have to sit there all night. Matter of fact, I think Saturday I worked like 8 at night to 8 in the morning on Sunday. It was just a horrible shift. And then during the week it was 12 to 8. I'd come down to that rotten neighborhood around 11:30 at night. Sometimes I'd even take the bus. That was a lot of fun. And I remember when I got hired, the first night that I went home, I was watching Cops, and they were busting someone right along the wall of the record plant studio. So that didn't give me a whole bunch of confidence seeing that, but the way that it worked back then, Sunset Boulevard was where the female hookers worked, and the male ones worked on Santa Monica, which is right where the record plant was. So they were busting a male prostitute right on the wall of the record plant. I'd love to find that Cops episode again. But anyway, so I got inside the building there, and I, hung in there and tried to do this horrible job for a couple months, but it was really miserable, and, wasn't really learning anything or getting to do any of the work that I came out to Los Angeles to do. I was, scrubbing bathroom floors and dusting and doing all this junk that had nothing to do with my degree. And then, one night, the manager of the record plant, a lady named Rose, gave me these brass elephant book holders, like these big, heavy brass book holders, book ends, and more like paperweights or something. Anyway, and she said, "Why don't you take these home and polish them for me when you're not working?" It's bad enough that I had to be a janitor at a recording studio, which is nothing wrong with being a janitor. It's just that I wanted to work in my chosen field inside the studio, working with musicians and, recording records. Anyway, so that pissed me off enough that I quit. I dropped the elephants off and I got a job at another studio, and that will continue on with my stories about Michael Jackson, because that was at Ocean Way Studios and Record One, where Michael Jackson was recording Dangerous, and I've told many of these stories on here over the years, so I'm going to cut this off for now, but we all got to start somewhere in the business, and that was my first job at the record plant recording studio. All right, enjoy your weekend.